According to the latest figures released by UNESCO, over 1.3 billion learners around the world are not being able to attend school or university since March 23rd. The United Nations has described the global scale and pace of education disruption from COVID-19 as unparalleled. According to the World Bank's Learning Poverty Indicator, the percentage of children who cannot read and understand at age 10 stood at 53% in low and middle income countries, including ours, before the outbreak started. This pandemic has the potential to worsen these outcomes if we do not act fast. But amidst this pandemic, new forms of innovations are also accelerating. Today, we will look into the South Asian emergency response, innovations, and how, and really ask ourselves how we can utilize this time as an opportunity to reimagine education. In today's panel, on the role of innovators, we have two innovators, Waliullah Bhuiya, who is the co-founder and chief executive officer of Light of Hope. Light of Hope is a tech-based education startup focusing on developing tech-based solutions for children. Waliullah won the Unilever Young Entrepreneurs Award 2018 for developing Sputnik. It's a solar-run, flexible multimedia classroom solution that fits inside a backpack. Pavitra Bahadur Gautam, co-founder and chief executive officer of Karkhana. Through Karkhana, he's trying to create a platform that connects real life and classroom using maker-based education to create critical learners for the 21st century. He's also an executive member of the National Governing Council of Nepal's Young Entrepreneurs Forum. Thank you both for joining us today. So without wasting any time, let's just jump into the conversation. Pavitra, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing fine. Thank you so much.
Right. If you could quickly tell us how Nepal is coping with COVID-19 and what does the emergency response in education look like in your country?
The situation is, I think, similar in the region. The country has been under lockdown for last more than a month now. The latest figures are in Nepal, we have around 58 confirmed cases. Out of them, 16 have recovered. So around 40 active cases until now. The government has done around 54,000 tests. So in that case, the number of rising cases is not comparable to other countries, but still we're in the lockdown situation. All the schools are closed, all the colleges are closed, and all the possible steps like going online is on the rise now. Actually, because this time the education system in our country, particularly in school level, they would go to school for a new academic session around the mid of April. So that was supposed to happen, which is taking a stall right now. And the government is looking through different ways how they can recover this situation, particularly in the education sector, but there's not been any clear directive coming out of it until yet.
Right, thank you so much. Well, in Bangladesh, we know that the television channel Shongshod TV has started broadcasting subject-wise lessons. But what else is happening, and what are your views, Wali Bhai, if you could share briefly?
As you know, so in Bangladesh, the government had taken the initiative where they have brought in about 28 to 30 different partners in education space, including us and you, so who have been developing contents for children, right? For a long time. 10-minute school is there. So there is a platform called education.edu, something like that, which is essentially the central platform for all the contents so far been developed for pre-primary students to up to like secondary tertiary level education. So that's an online platform that's now up and running, apart from the TV channel that's going on. So like from a very country perspective, these are the two biggest initiatives that's been taken by the government in partnership with other like partners like us. from the individual organization level, I think like the kind of work that we're doing right now is so we had a lot of content regarding preschool children and like primary level education. So we made all of them open on our YouTube channel. We're running 3 shows, one for parents, 3 for children. And since our focus is on making sure how we can not just academic stuff, but creativity, problem solving skills, emotional intelligence, things like that, preparing children for 21st century. Um, so we've been running these shows regularly. And there are other organizations who are also running similar kind of program
Well, if
on the
I can
web.
just pause you there for
Yes.
a bit. Sorry, I wanted to know how your innovations in terms of addressing parents, children, and teacher, how your innovations have evolved pre-COVID era and now during this COVID era.
Oh, okay. So then a quick overview what we have been doing so far, right? So Lighthub is structured in a way that we have been developing products, contents for children, and then we had an after school brand called Kids Time, which is the after school brand where kids were coming every week and then having all these different courses. We had parenting sessions, trainings, and teacher training and courses like that. We've been working with schools directly. So far we are now working with more than 500 schools. So it's a combination of both offline and online activities that we have been doing before COVID, right? Uh, but now since all the schools are closed, all of our after school centers are also closed. So what do we, and the sales of our physical products is like almost down to zero now. So what we're forced to do is, okay, opening up all of our content, the books for free. So like all our books are free to download right now. And so far we have got like 100,000 download by the parents. We have made all of our online courses free totally for the teachers and for the parents to take. Uh, and we see a huge growth in terms of new enrollment of the parents and teachers in those courses. As I mentioned before, we're running 3-4 different shows, and we're seeing amazing growth in those shows, especially the parenting show. Like this show, we're getting like 50,000, 40,000 views, which shows there is a huge, change in terms of parents' behavior. Like previously, it was like the teachers in the schools who have been taking care of the children, and right now they are realizing that now is the parents, is us, who at least for next few months have to act like the teachers of our own children. So these are
Right,
some of the
very
things that we do.
interesting. Thank you so much. It's interesting to see how you're working with the government to develop this education hub, the platform that's called that's www.eduhub.com, and also looking into the critical thinking, problem solving, and creativity aspect of students, and also bringing parents on board. Pavitra, if you could share your work and how you're also, I believe you're also working in similar frame, and how you're also addressing all these stakeholders in with your innovations.
So currently, I think right after the lockdown started in Nepal, which was around 5 weeks ago, we at Karkhana, we started a small campaign, online campaign, where we addressed 3 major areas that we felt is going to be required at this time. The first one was around the idea of working at home or learning at home. We focused on how kids can keep learning even when they're at home. So we started designing these small DIY activities. These DIY activities were based on everyday materials that's available in our homes. Sorry. In our available homes. So we did that for the children, and we've been continuing to generate more contents around that idea, and all this content is freely available in our website. The another one that we felt that is required at this time was the school support, because we felt that this is something that school have not anticipated, and many of them actually don't know how to engage with students online, or even the idea of virtual learning or distance learning or let's say online learning. So all these ideas are relatively very new to them. So we felt that it would be interesting for our educators, teachers, school leaders to understand this aspect of learning as well. So we started designing workshops. We started holding conversations with school leaders, and eventually that has taken a form where we're designing lessons, workshops for our teachers that's happening at the current moment. And the third part of our campaign was the well-being part of the well-being part, where we said that it's very important to take care of your emotional well-being at this time, and it's not only your emotional well-being but the emotional well-being of your family uh, as well. So we designed a small course around it. So all these three aspects of uh, keep learning for students, the school support for school leaders and teachers, and then well-being for parents and family at home. So we started this three campaign, and while taking this campaign forward, eventually more and more organizations started collaborating with us. And actually, currently we have a large group of around 40 organizations that are loosely coming together, where they're collaborating with each other, sharing ideas, sharing content, holding conversations and webinars together. So this group is coming together. So that has been the response until now from our side. But the whole idea is, I think the first response on education has been taken by the organizations and people who have access to internet, because it was much easier, right?
Right.
But there's a larger
Right,
conversation
Pavitra,
going.
I'll just briefly, share something. You both have very interestingly pointed out that you're making contents and books available for free, and you're essentially addressing the current need. The emergency response is what you're looking at, but it kind of leaves a bigger elephant in the room unaddressed. There is a huge number of students who do not have access to technology and who are affected by the digital divide. If I could, start with Wali Bhai, how do you think, the digital divide or this context is, in the case of Bangladesh, how relevant is this? And how should what are we doing about it, and what can be really done about this big digital divide that is going to eventually create inequality among students coming back to the school, coming back to the classrooms?
So okay, so but for the audience, it's important that I give how big the issue is, right? Right now, Bangladesh is running probably the sixth largest education system in the world. We're the eighth most populous country in the world, and we're running the sixth
Okay, Wali Bhai is breaking up a little.
to 20 million children at the primary level only. Now we're talking about digital divide and lack of access to learning in this particular situation when the schools are not providing the access for the students. If you look into the numbers of media access and the type of media access that we have in our country now, 96% households have mobile access, 50% households have access to TV, and 37% of the households have internet, right? And so these are basically the most like common stuff that are available. So all this 96% people who have mobile phone doesn't necessarily they have smartphone, and doesn't necessarily mean they have internet connection. So providing education or access to education is not going to be the case for all these 96% households who have a mobile phone. So the question becomes how we can use the top two media, the TV, which is 50% of the households have a TV, and then the internet, which is 37%. Now we can't make sure in a very short time to make sure that everybody can have a TV, everybody can afford an internet connection. We can't make sure of that unless we have better and to own internet and use internet. So now the question will the more relevant question will be what we're going to do with the existing students who have either access to internet or access to TV. um, I don't think the digital device is something is you can't just take it off within 1 year or so. So it's just like you have we have to deal with it. It's like some portion of the population, if the school is not open, they're not gonna get any access. That's the reality. Nobody can do anything about that. But what we can do about something is the households who have TV or internet access, or some other mean, how can we make sure that we can provide still quality education, entertaining and interactive learning opportunity to this group. But I don't think we can actually do anything about the current digital divide.
Right, interestingly, but it also kind of gives us a span of time to prepare for when these students come back to classrooms and how we are going to cope with the students who absolutely did not have access to technology, hence did not have access to structured learning, and those who did, because they will be coming back to the same classroom, completing the same curriculum and sitting for the same exams. So I think this period should be taken as a
Yes.
as a time to prepare for what's to come next. But Pavitra, I'm curious, what are the challenges and gaps in case of Nepal, and how can we use innovations to overcome those?
As what you were saying, the challenges that exist in Bangladesh are, I think, are very similar in case of Nepal as well, because the internet penetration is not a lot. I think the internet penetration is around 40-ish% in Nepal at the moment, and even that's more because of the mobile internet. Yes, the mobile penetration on the other hand is quite large, is around 90% at the point, and there are other um, things like the TV existence or the radio existence is that's more in village areas or rural areas places, right? So in that challenge, I think that only looking after the online solution or virtual learning is very limited, and would not be able to address the whole set of children. But in the meantime, when the situation like this has happened, where we will probably not be able to gather a large number of students, or let's say 30, 40 students in the same place, we'd have to resort to other means of providing them learning experiences. And as well, you're saying that maybe we should think of other ways like television programs which caters to a set of students where they can continue their learning through the television, or some form of video program that can be done. So that's the kind of challenges that's going on. The other challenges is definitely the lack of coordination, and I think as everybody is experimenting with all these ideas, so we're still trying to figure out what's a good, well coordinated reaction or response to the current situation. So I think there's a lot of movement happening, but I think we need to figure out how we can align all these efforts and create better synergies for an optimal outcome.
Right. So we have a question for Wali Bhai. So basically the question is, how will things change when we get back to normal? Essentially, it will not be a normal, it will be a new normal. And at that point, this gap is only going to get bigger. So how should education innovators prepare for that time? What would be your take, and how would you advise others?
So what I see right now, the kind of change, especially the kind of especially the parents who have a fair degree of education, have a fair degree of understanding what's actually going to happen in coming years for the children and the children's future, they are smart enough to quickly adapt to a situation where they are not just worried or concerned about the academic results, but they're also concerned about the skills that their students, their children need to acquire: creativity, problem solving, communication, and all these different skills. So there will be a huge change among the group of parents who are educated and smart enough. So that's one group, which is probably 10 to 15% of the entire parent group that we have now. And then there is a middle group who will always look at the group who are the fast adopter. So in the next 5 years, I will assume that about 30 to 40% of the entire parents group of all these children will be educated viewing these future skills as an essential need for their own children. And there will be always laggards, like you can't just force them to adopt anything. Now when it comes down to the question of how the schools are going to change their own curriculum to philosophy and the things that they want to provide, I think there will be two types of different response. One is the response from the government schools, right, which is like owned and run by the government, which is about 50% of all the schools that we have now in our country. And we have a huge number of kindergarten schools in our country, which is like 50% of the entire school entire number of schools that we have. There will be an interesting change going on within the private schools. The schools who are smart enough to understand there is a need from the parents to make change in their curriculum, those schools are going to change. And as far as I know, government is also looking at changing the curriculum. It's already like in the ministry level, and they're talking about it, and they're changing the curriculum and trying to fit in all these future skills into the curriculum. So I've been saying this COVID-19 is basically a trailer of a movie that's gonna show you what's going to expect in the future, especially in the future of job and the kind of skills that we'll be needing, even we will be needing. Like jobs in 5 years time is gonna completely change. And this is just a trailer. So I see there will be a huge change in the mindset of people, of parents, of schools, of policymakers in the education system, right? So
interesting. You're saying that there will be a change in the curriculum, a change in the school's policies and philosophies. I'm interested to know, Pavitra. So this change in curriculum or change
and
in
it will be forced because a lot of parents will be wanting this. Like we don't change our policies unless people want the change. So since the change will be coming from the parents, a lot of private schools will be forced to make their own change, in terms of curriculum and everything.
Right. So when we have this change in curriculum, what should be really the change for, or what should be the objective of education? What should be the objective of going to schools and classrooms? And what should this change be around? Pavitra, if you could share your views.
Thank you, Asma. I think when the education, this kind of modern education started taking a shape, I think this kind of education took a shape in a way that there was a large focus on building our students into job holders, or creating people who have a set of skills. Let's say we have a career that's designed for people who are in medical sector, people to prepare in engineering sector, or people to prepare in service sector or tourism sector. So we kind of designed education in a way that people should start to fit in these existing sectors, right? And these diversity of sectors were limited in the past. But when you look at the diversity of sector in last 10-15 years, there has been a tremendous number of new sectors that have evolved. And these sectors are actually, some of the sectors are hybrid of multiple sectors. Some sectors are entirely new on its own. So all these new sectors have actually, I think, created this disruption in the job market, where the need of the people and the requirement of the skills has evolved a lot, which we can understand in the change that has happened in past 18 years when the internet took off, when the services like Uber, let's say, or let's say Airbnb started. Like, whole job market has evolved a lot. And in this kind of evolved job sector, I think what's happening now is, what, as Wally said, is a glimpse of what could be eventually in the future, how jobs might actually evolve in a way that we have not thought about, and the pace of this change has been growing ever. Um, so I do think that the purpose of education from this point onwards, I think, should be more on creating people who are better learners, who can adapt to change, who are flexible enough to understand the change in the job sector. Because uh, let's say previously it took like 10, 15 or 15, 20 years for a sector to evolve. But nowadays it doesn't take that long. For a new sector to emerge, it's just like 2, 3 years and a new sector will be there. Like there's a whole new market about apps and how people are earning through YouTube, right? It was not a sector that existed a couple of years back. But I think we need people who are flexible enough, curious enough. They have a very strong learning attitude. So yes, I think the education should not be more about knowledge or information. They should be more about skills, and actually rather around the idea of better attitude of learning attitude, attitude to work together in teams, attitude to find and solve problems, think critically. I think education should be more about preparing kids to learn for their future rather than work for a sector. I think that's the kind of the purpose the education should focus towards.
Very,
So
very nicely pointed out, Pavitra.
just
So,
to add with
sure, sure. I'll
just to
just,
add with Pavitra,
sure, go ahead.
the I think like the role of schools is like basically these three. One is, am I preparing a kid who is gonna go out of my school is smart enough to figure out his or her own way? Uh, um, did I give enough empathy and moral values education to this kid? And does this kid have enough expertise and communication skill to work with others in collaboration? So it's like collaborative learning, self-learning, like critical thinking, and like nurture a bit of their mind and give a strong character foundation. So like this should be the role of schools.
Right. So we're looking
That's
at
my
the
opinion.
bigger picture and the bigger objective of preparing the students for an uncertain time, just the same as we're dealing with currently. But there are
Yes.
schools, there are teachers who are bound by curriculums, who are bound by syllabus. We have a question from the vice principal of William Carey International School, and she's saying that we are running online classes through Zoom, WhatsApp, Messenger, Facebook group, etc. Can you please share your views how we will manage exam procedure, report card, as we all start our new session? So that is also, persistent challenge, persistent problem that is facing us. How will we, go back to the examinations? How will we go back to our syllabus? How, how they can readdress this? So I'll start with Walibhai, and then Pavitra, if you could also share your view.
My question would be like, why you should be worried about taking question right taking exam right now? In 1971, when we had liberation war, we stopped our entire education for 1 year, right? Like, so like at this moment, why we should be bothered about taking exam? I don't think this is the right time to see. Kids at home are as stressed and sometimes are more stressed than the adults. We adults, we parents are watching all this news on COVID every day, how many people are dying and everything, and we're passing that down through our behavior and everything onto our kids. And kids naturally, like, they are not like confined, like they don't love to be confined in a fixed physical space, so they are locked down for 1 month. So right, like they are in a more stressful situation, so like putting on exams and all this stuff that they hate in even a regular time, I think it's a bad idea to continue continue taking exam at this moment. You can have all this online classes, have fun, like in a more informal way of learning and things like that, but I don't think taking or giving homework, taking exam is the right approach right now for kids, for even for the adults, right, like university students.
Right. I guess so. The bigger question is, should education be defined by examinations, or should
No.
education be defined by assessment? If not, then how do we understand progress, Pavitra?
Yes, aligning my idea with, I think we should not worry about exams or uh, redesigning the current situation into fitting the old system. I think that's not the way we should be thinking towards. Again, I think the COVID situation or the Corona situation currently is a big learning in itself, because if you actually explore a bit about Corona, there's a large amount of history involved with it. If you think about Corona, there's a large amount of science involved with it, right? There's amazing mathematics involved with Corona. There's a lot of social studies that you can learn from Corona. I think if we can focus on how we can convert this difficulty, stressful time into learning in itself, I think that should be the way out. And I think that's the whole idea of theme-based education, right? Or let's say project-based learning, or the problem-based learning. So I think we're already in a problem, or we're already in a theme. So why don't we use this existing theme to learn more about uh, different ideas regarding this topic itself? And something that I'm finding really concerning at the point of which I am seeing in many educators is video chat is not learning. First, we have to understand that, right? Because we're just converting Skype, or let's say Facebook conversation, or let's say even a Zoom. Just imagining that if I am connected to 30 or 40 students through Zoom, and I'm explaining some idea to a set of students, they will learn in the same way that they used to in a regular classroom. I think that's a big assumption, and I don't think that's the right assumption to take at this point, because a good learning happens when there's a good engagement from the students and the teacher or the facilitator, right? And after that engagement, there's an exploration of ideas, there's this experience of ideas, and when that exploration completes, then there's a reflection of that exploration, of that engagement, and there's this review of this entire experience, and this entire process becomes a learning. So whenever I see people converting WhatsApp or Zoom calls and calling it an educational experience, I'm worried, because then my question is, where's the engagement? Where's the exploration? Where's the reflection? Because if you're not having all these elements in the conversation, then I don't think there's a learning happening. Of course, there's an engagement happening, but is it engaging the students or not? Or they're just engaged? So I think there are concerns like that.
Right. Very, very nicely put, Pavitra. Walibai, I'm just curious, how do you feel going forward? You know, this time, this pandemic has actually given us a plain white paper for us to redraw. It's kind of a scope for us to redraw how we want to see learning, how we want to see education, how we want to see our curriculum. So if you had to redraw that, all of that, what would that look like in your case?
Um, so so when so since like we structured our whole organization in a way that we can actually tap into a child's life either in home or at school or anywhere that the learning happens, and can provide different types of learning, right? So that's the whole company is structured. So it's like, so so from a theoretical point of view, I assume that if schools are the factories where we can produce, empathic and creative human being as an output. The input is like, okay, 3-4 year kids are going in, and as an output 12-13 years old kids are coming out from primary school who are more empathic, more creative, uh, with the problem solving skills and things like that. So it's like the entire question is, what should be the different parts of that factory, right? Like if we consider schools are the factories of producing better human being. So that's the kind of a mindset change that we need to make first regarding what should be the output of the schools. It's not students with better CGPAs, but it's the children coming out with more prepared, for tackling the future. Now then the question comes down to, okay, fine, like if I want to provide creativity, problem solving skill, critical thinking, moral values and things like that, what will be the way to go about it? So in last 3 years, we actually developed an entire framework of how we can actually provide all these skills to the children from 3 to 12 years old. And based on that framework, we've been developing all of our contents and curriculum, like all of our products. And based on that, we've been developing teachers courses, like how the teachers can actually provide these skills at school. And also for the parents, that how the parents can actually instill these skills to their children at home using their own materials, books and products and things like that, right? So and for the assessment question, it's like, okay, what is the role of assessment? The role of assessment is to make sure, like, okay, if the opportunity in somewhere, whether it's a job or higher education or something, how we are defining whether the student is good or not to get into that system, because like the number of jobs are 5 and then you have 100 applicants, number of seats are 10 and you have 100 applicants, so you need some kind of assessment tool to figure out who is good at what. Now for our own centers in the kids time, we have developed an assessment system that is not based on these numbers marks, but on actually what we're trying to assess is the level of creativity and problem solving skills of the children. So it is difficult, but it's doable. But when it comes down to the question of whether it can be applied at a national level, that question needs to be like answered by doing a lot of researches. But I think this is the time when we also need to rethink about what is assessment and what it is for. So the future of education or schools and learning should be based on these fundamental principles and these fundamental building blocks. The role of curriculum, the role of teacher, the role of school, and the role of education aligned with what we want our children and students to be in next 20 years, 30 years time, we'll have our answer figured out. So that's not a difficult thing.
Right. So we have a question from Irad Kausar, who is from YGAP. So he has a question for all the panelists. He said that, is it a time when maybe we should think about moving away from a broad, actually a board-defined curriculum and move towards a crowdsourced curriculum? If yes, then what might be the first steps towards that, a crowdsourced curriculum? Very interesting idea. So maybe we can start with Pavitra and then Wali bhai, if you could share.
Thank you for the question. The way I understand a crowdsourced curriculum, as there's this idea that's being defined by one of the professor in University of Illinois as that the community itself can be a curriculum, like community as a curriculum, right? His idea was because the way curriculum is defining learning outcomes is in itself is very broad. And at many times, when I look at the curriculum in many countries, I've been through curriculum that's of course in Nepal, the one in Bangladesh, the one in Singapore, even the IB curriculum itself. I think the notion of the curriculum is always very interesting, but the way that curriculum is implemented is a challenging one, right? And I don't think the curriculum is the problem here. The way curriculum is translated and implemented is the problem, because it's in the same way, right? The religion itself is never a question, but the people who actually translate that religion are the ones who have to be blamed for the concerns that come out of the religion. It's very similar with the curriculum itself, because people who understand the curriculum, understand the notion of the curriculum, they can use amazing methods, they can use amazing ways to convert that curriculum in a wonderful learning outcome for students. And of course, like the curriculum does not define that you have to exactly read that same exact book in that same exact manner. Curriculum actually focuses on what kind of student eventually a learner should be, what kind of mindset should be prepared, what kind of skill set should be developed in students. So I think that should be more of an idea about looking at the curriculum. But again, even the curriculum, of course, I do think that the curriculum should change according to current need, because the society in itself has altered or evolved in a larger perspective. So I do think that the existing curriculum has to be amended in a way that there should be a lot of community-based ideas that is influencing the way that curriculum is defined, or let's say implemented. And I think there's a very good resources out there that describes how community can actually act as a curriculum in itself. So I think if we can combine these two ideas together, there could be something. And I kind of align with that idea.
Right. I really like what you said about religion. It's not really the problem. The problem is not around religion, but the people who practice it. And, they have their own versions of it. Wali bhai, if you could very briefly, because in the interest of time, we have very little time, if you could very briefly share your views.
See, when we're inside a system, right, like government is never going to adopt, or any government school is not going to adopt a crowdsource, right? And same goes for the schools. A school has a certain system, they have a certain, curriculum, and that they need to abide to. They have exams and stuff like that. But like for innovators like us, we're running after school program, we're running after school centers. Maybe in the future I'll be running my own school chain, where I will be able to probably take up those curriculum and even the contents, and can use in my after school program, in my program, because I'm not defined by a certain standard or a certain system. And so that's why the role of parents comes in. If the parents see, okay, if we're talking about children who are under 12, who don't have their own mobile and stuff like that, need to be assisted by the parents. So parents themselves at home, they can take all these different stuffs and can use them on with their children. But children who are big enough, like let's say 15 16 plus and above, they have everything that they need, and they can decide what they want, and they can take their own education, like any course, anything that they want, so they can just have it. So in a very structured manner in schools and education system, it's not going to happen that they're going to adopt crowdsource curriculum or content. But for innovators like us, it's not a problem, and we're actually doing that. Like some of our courses are actually inspired from the curriculum in Finland, in Finnish schools, right? So like we are open to that.
Right. Right. Very interestingly said. And, essentially when it comes to crowdsourcing, also like bringing the voice of various stakeholders into the scene, especially the children, and asking the students and the children what they want to learn, and kind of also making them an important stakeholder when crowdsourcing a curriculum would be ideal, I think. A question for Pavitra from GM Rakibul Islam. Rakib Bhai has asked, is there any educational innovation in Nepal that everyone can access easily? And what he means is those organizations which do not widen the education gap or the digital divide. Definitely yours is there, but is there any other organization?
Thank you. I quickly want to touch upon the previous conversation around the crowdsourcing of the curriculum. One of the challenges I find about democratizing the curriculum is the democracy in itself has a lot of fallacies, right? If we started crowdsourcing the curriculum, one of the challenges I see is the minority will have problems with it, because maybe the majority will starting to dictate the curriculum in itself, right? So bringing full-on democracy in curriculum design should be more of a education in itself should be much more inclusive. Of course, there should be a community-based approach, or let's say people's voice should be heard in terms of redesigning the curriculum. But I think there should be a strong direction given by the expert who understand education, educational pedagogies, educational psychology much better. So I think it's very important that we mix both of these ideas together. For the question that I was asked about any educational innovation in Nepal that's happening is, of course, there are a lot of apps that's coming out, because I think there's already a lot of apps that focus around supporting school and parents communication that were already there. So a little innovation like some of these apps have converted notice feature into a homework or assignment feature, or let's say sending daily activities to the parents through these mobile apps. So this kind of small innovations are happening. Many community radios have started running small learning programs 2-3 times a day for children. That has started. A lot of TV stations have started classes around science, technology, or let's say even computer. That's happening, but these are all smaller innovation. Something at large, I think that's happening is a lot of teachers are using their available technology, and I think when I say a lot of teachers, I think not more than 50%, because more than that, I don't think there's internet availability for them. But teachers or educators who have access to internet, they are using internet in their own mediums. Like some people are creating their Facebook groups where they're engaging their students with something that's really commendable that happened through one of our largest university in Nepal is they actually came out with a distance learning directive for all of its campuses and all of its classes. And I think when universities like that start to come out of like full-on online education or distance education directive, I think these are definitely positive angles to take.
Great, thank you, Pavitra. We have with us Irad Kausar, who's the country director of YGAP. He would like to ask a question to the both of you. Irad bhai, whenever you're ready, I'm putting you up. Okay, while we wait, so it's very interesting how you've said, when we have democracy, not to undermine certain voices is very important, and to actually look into the minority community, and also the special students with special needs is also important, and how it's important to also incorporate their needs now when we are trying to reimagine learning, or when we are trying to look into education going forward. Irad bhai is here. I'll just pass it on to you, Irad bhai. Please go ahead.
Hey, hello Pavitra, and hello Walibhai, and Azwapo, I must say, very, very nicely moderated session, and a very, very timely one. YGAP is proud to be part of this initiative. I would, from an accelerator perspective, I would love to hear from both of you, from Pavitra and Walibhai, that if I asked for three things, top three things that, from an accelerator's perspective, for all the education innovator, what accelerator programs should be doing, or what can the accelerator program can do to support the education innovators, because we are heading towards a new normal. So I think as an accelerator program, we should also think and try and adapt to how best we can support in the new time.
Okay.
Top three.
Pavitra, you want to go first?
3 points would be great for all the South Asian education innovators.
So you want time to think.
So it's like 3 points, right?
No, I can say number one is the obvious one. We need funding. So you guys can go ahead with the rest of the two.
No, thank you, Rad, for the question. No, I think as an accelerator, I think your responsibility is going much bigger now, because it's not about just education sector, but I think the economy in itself is going to take a huge hit after Corona, and accelerators like yours have to play a big role in reviving economy in all the countries. Because I'm also part of Nepalese Young Entrepreneurs Forum, so I understand the concern that you have. So as you said, the number one is already there. I have two more ideas, my personal opinions. The first one is at many times, because the education sector is not a money-making sector. It's in itself by nature, it's a social enterprise model, right? Because education in itself is a social service, and many times the finances, the kind of exciting, attracting finances is not there in education. So finding right passionate people and converting education as a attractive model to engage with, even in the acceleration, or let's say even in the startup scene, is very important, I guess, because I'm sure that's very true in Nepal, but I'm not sure how true is in Bangladesh. But many people never opt out to be involved in the education sector. Many people who have very good skills, attitude, or who have wonderful prospect in developing any career they would get into, I think they choose education as a very last option. So I think glorifying the education sector is going to be very important, because I see a lot of young people not thinking about getting into education sector at all, and there are very handful of people who get into the sector. That's the first one. The second one is because now the education has become very diverse, not because of the population, but because of the diversity of sector that has evolved in last decade, right? There's so much more that has happened in the economy, in the market, in the livelihood of people, and education in itself by nature is preparing people so that they can bring out a livelihood in the things that they want, in the job they want, in the kind of life they want. So actually, accelerator can play a big role in terms of connecting educational startups and education passionate people who want to involve in education, by connecting them to other sectors so that they understand the larger need of education itself. Because if a teacher does not understand what is the economy that is involved in YouTube and the video making in YouTube and the revenue that can come out of it, the teacher would never encourage someone to be a YouTuber, right? So I think until and unless these kind of sectors are explored for educators or educational startups, there would not be a big change in the way education is approached. So for me, these are the two ideas. One is glamorizing or making education sector as a popular sector, and the second one is cross connection between education sector individual with other sector people. That would...
I really like the idea of making education everyone's business. I really like that. Wali Bhai, in the interest of time, if we could just briefly, in
yeah,
a minute.
Sure. So Irat, since like my organization Lighthouse is also an ex-accelerator of YGAP, so I can like directly go bang on like what are the three things that you can do. The number one, like don't take more startups now, especially education startups, but nurture your existing education startups. That's the number one thing that you should do. Second, a lot of sectors are being hit in the startup, but one of the biggest sector that's being hit massively is the startups who are working in education sector. So if you can provide any kind of financial support, be it loan or like payable debt or something, like any kind of financial support would help at this moment for the startups. Third, if you can support these startups with different types of partnerships, right? Like for example, YGAP Bangladesh can easily support us. For example, we're running a TV show or we're running a show, and YGAP has access to Channel I, and you guys can talk like, okay, can we air the show on the channel at a certain time? Or a certain organization who are doing this, you see we're developing contents, you figure out this can be a wonderful match, connect us. So partnership. So these are the three things.
Great, awesome. We're kind of over time. We'll very quickly end with this final question from GM Rakibul Islam. Rakib Bhai has asked, what would be your suggestion for educational innovators, educational innovators in this crisis situation? Where should they focus on, and how should they navigate through this absolutely uncertain time? We will just end with that question, Pavitra and then Wali Bhai.
I think the first thing I'd answer is first, take care of your people. Because for any organization, it's not the organization, it's the people that are more important. So I think making sure that your people are safe, they're comfortable, they feel safe. I think that's the first thing to do. Because until and unless your team is secure, your team is safe, you can do nothing beyond that. I think that's the first step. And the second step for educational innovators is, I think this is a wonderful time as an opportunity to rethink education. So let's not get stuck with what education was. Let's take this moment to think about what education can be. So let's be crazy about what are the different ideas that we can test, because nobody knows what they have to do. Even the government is not sure what they have to do, right? So maybe we can actually come up with an interesting way. So let's not get worried about the failure of the experiments that we might do, but I think the number of experiments should be more. And but at the end of the day, one simple idea that we should all focus towards is learning should not stop. Even inside a classroom, outside the classroom, just at home, wherever you are, learning is an attitude, and we should facilitate that attitude. We should help that attitude. We should encourage that attitude through whatever means we can do. If we can focus all our efforts in that one point, but experiment with as many as possible ideas, experiments that we can do, and before that, make sure that your team is fine, safe, and secure. I think that would be my opinion. Thank you.
Wali bhai.
So first off, if you are not having an initiative right now, it's not a good time to actually start one, right? Like, this is a crazy time, so you shouldn't start one right now. But even still, if you insist to start a new educational startup, or you already have one, like broadly speaking, you have to understand, as an education innovator or a startup, you have basically either have to be into two domains. Either you are a creator, you are a creator of content, courses, curriculum, you are a creator, right? Like, and your organization or your startup is creating more contents and products. So that's one. Or you are a distributor, meaning you develop an app, you develop platforms, you develop things like that, and using other people's content to distribute it. So first you have to understand what's your skill sets are, what's your team skill sets are, whether you can be a good creator or a good distributor. So focus on that, what you want to be first. You can be both, but pick one first, right? So that's the first thing. Second is in terms of age group or the segment that you should target. Right now in Bangladesh, there are a lot of startups who are focusing on students who are above 16, 18 to like till 25, 20, up to 30 into the professional level skills and things like that.
Wali bhai, in the interest of time, if we can just very, very briefly summarize that.
So if you want to figure out or target a certain segment, it should be children between 3 to 12, the primary level children. If you can develop contents, products for this group, the opportunity of being successful is better than targeting the students who are above 16, because there are a lot of competition over there.
Right. So on that note, I feel, thank you so much for joining us, Pavitra and Wali bhai. So on that note, basically what I was about to say is, let's not be scared to experiment. Let's not be scared to innovate and to really paint a new future of education, and to ensure that our students, our children, are better prepared for a tomorrow filled with uncertainties. Thank you all for joining us today. Hope we'll see you again in our next episode, where we look into how we can reimagine education and look into the role of education leaders, teachers, and parents. Thank you so much.